Welcome back to Afters. I'm your host, Anthony Cuellar. My next guest has been on my wish list for the podcast since the very beginning. Please help me in welcoming Naija Couture, also known as Adonis, also known as Biblically Accurate Butch Queen. I've truly loved getting to know Adonis through the rave scene over the years. He's hilarious, knowledgeable, community-driven, and an inspiration, really. He also has the best style and taste for music, film, and pop culture. We finally set the date to record this episode at one of the raves recently. We didn't even realize it would coincide with the election day 2024. There was a lot going on at the time, but I'm so happy we were able to capture this moment in time to reflect and share with all of you. Also, just to note, I was recording this solo for the first time in a new location, so you might hear a few taps on the table when we were really engaged in the conversation. Adonis, welcome.
Hey.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good for the most part. You know, we know everything crazy that's been happening in the world with the election. You know, I didn't even really think about when we were planning this. This would be the Tuesday after the election, but that's really funny. And, you know, really around everything like that's gone down, I'm glad that we're recording this at this time.
No, totally. And also right after Halloween, so.
Yeah, just after the Halloween rush and spiral of it all. Oof. That was a lot, but, you know, we landed.
Yeah, we did. Last time I saw you, it's probably at Nowadays or Zero Chill, both. I think that was the same weekend. But.
Yeah. No, I just saw you at Nowadays. Was that last week for DJ Hell?
Yes.
Yeah, so I just saw you last week. Ooh, that was good, though.
Yeah, honestly, I pulled up to that because I saw you and DJ Parker both talking about it. Miss Parker. I was like,
I love Parker down.
Like, you two are, like, such music geeks. I love, like, all the music that you share. So I'm like, can't miss this if they said so.
Yeah.
Tell me about yourself.
I was born in Dallas, Texas in 1992, and then I moved to Montgomery, Alabama when I was 3. And yeah, I lived there until I was 7 years old, and then we moved to this place called Albany, Georgia. It's like bigger than a town, but not as big as, you know, a place like Atlanta or even some of those other cities up there in like North Georgia. Lived around like wheat fields and things like that. If you drive a little bit far out, you're up in wheat fields. The central area of like entertainment was like the mall and the movie theater, and that's all they really had down there. Growing up, I also come from a Nigerian family, and I grew up really Catholic. So my upbringing is like, you know, it's really interesting. It was a lot, but, you know, I've grown to be the person I am now, and those definitely inform my experiences. So I can jump back a little bit. When I lived in Montgomery, Alabama, that's when I started getting into, like, you know, the pop culture things and stuff. I'm still a 90s kid, so I remember RuPaul had a TV show, and that was probably the first, like, big, like, thing that jumped out for me, like, as a kid. That's where Michelle Visage also comes from. I think she was on the talk show as well. But I remember as a little kid seeing, like, RuPaul with the hair and the dresses and all that stuff, and just like the grandiose attitude on the TV. And every time my parents would see that, they would turn it off because, you know, seeing this like very proud, like black and proud drag queen in the mid 90s, that was insane. That's crazy that she even got away with that. But, you know, she'd worked her way through like the club scene and, you know, appeared in random pop culture things. Like she was in Love Shack by the B-52s.
Really? The music video?
Yeah, she's in the music video.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's a little fun fact. She's definitely like the first like weird pop culture etching I remember. And then, you know, there's like Dennis Rodman and like in the 90s, you would go on MTV and they would still have like all this really queer content happening, even though we were also in the middle of like Don't Ask, Don't Tell and stuff like that. It had just jumped out of like what people call the AIDS epidemic. The images of queerness in the mid-90s was definitely in a really tethering place. And in the 90s in general, I remember being a kid and Matthew Shepard had just been killed. And there was this commercial on MTV where they were yelling, "Queer faggot, queer faggot." Like these kids were like, you're like the POV, you're the like the gay kid getting yelled at. And then it like this music drops, and then you see Matthew Shepard's mother holding this poster, and she says, you know, words do hurt. Because I think that's how it happened that night. Like these guys were like yelling, you know, those slurs at Matthew Shepard. Like the night he was murdered. You know, those are some of my early memories of like things that I was getting off of television. So I was really into television, and that's always been my main source of entertainment. And that's how I soaked in like pop culture from a very young age. I remember watching things like Pop-Up Video on VH1, where, you know, they like, for the people at home who don't know what Pop-Up Video is, it was a show in the mid 90s on VH1 where they would view like, you know, music videos, and they would like pop up like all these little facts at the bottom, and they would show you like an 80s video, like Mickey by Tilly Basil, or they would show you like Mbop by Hanson. And that's how I learned. That was like my first real diving into like the like absorption of just like mass pop culture facts. And that's always been my thing. I was really into the I Love the series in the early 90s that they also had on VH1, where you'd watch like I Love the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and they would just give you like all this like media crash course about the cultural backdrop around like music, media, film, just like events that happened in those different decades. And that's how I've learned like just so much from, pop culture all at once. And, there was also the late 90s where you'd watch things like TRL, Total Request Live. Mm-hmm. That show was really formative for me because I remember watching like Eminem for the first time. And like when he blew up, all the respective pop girlies of the late 90s, like Britney and Christina and Mandy Moore, Jessica Simpson, just can keep jumping in names. I remember seeing like Vitamin C.
Oh my God.
You would see anybody and everybody through TRL because, that's back when music videos were like mini movies. Mm-hmm. And they would have like, big, almost $1 million budgets or $1 million budgets for those things.
Do you think that that's still happening now? Like, you're really touching on something important because I feel like we had so much context into these different decades, especially when they were like, I love the 80s, 90s, but media has changed so much, platforms, like everything's streaming. Do you think that that's something that's missing right now? Like just kind of that, like contextualizing everything and time capsules?
Yes, absolutely. And this is something that I find myself, a lot of people know me for my rants and raves that I do or whatever online. And this is something that I talked about online a lot, that there's these all, especially after COVID and the TikTokification of everything, there's now becoming these big, weird cultural gaps where people are just saying things now and they have no cultural context of what they're saying. The one thing that I feel like we've seen with the TikTokification of things and that big cultural gap is people using the term Y2K terribly.
Everything's Y2K. Like
exactly. Everything's Y2K, but a lot of those like young people don't even understand what Y2K is. They're thinking about something that somebody was maybe wearing in like 2003 to 2007 or 6. Like, when White Chicks came out and like The Hot Chick and all those like, problematic movies. Like, I used to love those as a kid. I can't lie. But all those like problematic movies that were really like, thinking about like the girly girl of the time. Well, here's less problematic one, like Legally Blonde. Mm-hmm. Like they're thinking of that kind of fashion when Y2K was more like, I think of like the band Placebo.
The kind of like cyberpunk sort of style, right?
Yeah, like cyberpunk.
Do you remember the band Orgy? Like that's kind of
yes, yeah, exactly. Like Orgy. Oh my God, that cover Blue Monday that was on. No, it wasn't on I Know What You Did Last Summer. It was on The Faculty. The Faculty was a really good horror film. Like an alien
and they had such great soundtracks back in the day for all of these movies.
Yeah.
It could be like a shitty movie, like made no money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what Y2K is. Like that, like, really hyper panic around like when the clock strikes midnight 2000s, will computers be able to jump from 99 to 2000? I think of when Columbine happened. Mm-hmm. I think of, they started trying to clone and even just stuff adjacent to that, like
cloning the animals.
Yeah, like I think of like the Blair Witch Project.
Didn't Ice Spice have an album called Y2K?
Yeah, had that Y2K, that terrible cover. Yeah. And I listen to some of the music. Her music is whatever. I feel like that also just kind of like threw all that shit I'm talking about around people not knowing what Y2K was and just put it through like, a shit show filter. Yeah. It's like we're just like using these words just because. And people are not really thinking about the cultural context and they're not really thinking of where these words came from. Everybody's just saying something now.
I agree. And that spills over into so many other areas as well. Like language is powerful, but like I think people are also using it to simplify and water down a lot as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like, language is powerful. People have been saying just crazy things to each other around just the blaming of who got Trump elected currently. And just really, really, really terrible. A lot of people are saying, they're saying this stuff around like, well, I'll just call ICE on these Latinos because they all voted for Trump. Bro, first of all, you have to be like American born to vote for Trump. So you, first of all, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. And, now you're just like spouting off all this like anti-Latino sentiment that you've always had in your heart, but, you never felt comfortable to say until now. And it just makes no sense. And then, people are doing the same thing around like black women. Just be like, it's black women's fault this happened. Where it's like, black women didn't even really vote for Trump like that. So let's all just dial it back instead of like just throwing like really intense like hate at each other. Let's all just sit with the fact that this is a thing that happened.
Yeah.
These things have happened before. People were horrified when, Trump got elected the first time.
Yeah, he's already been elected.
They were horrified when Bush got elected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, terrible stuff happened to Bush because, like, the Iraq War, war was horrible. Even on Trump's worst day, that didn't even happen. But, we did have a pandemic that the lack of care during that, and even after that, I feel like a lot of people have adopted in their minds has just really like taken society to a not great turn.
This is going to be an interesting time period for art, even.
Exactly. That's what I was going to jump into. I feel like now people should be taking art into their hands, but I also feel like we're in this weird plateau where I feel like, some stuff is good, but a lot of stuff is not really good right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even people having arguments over Lady Gaga's new song, and people hate what Azealia Banks says, but I mean, she made this post around Gaga's not using her voice the way she used to, and that's something that I was like, oh wait, she is doing this thing with her voice where she's not screaming like the way she did on Fame. Mm-hmm. And the Fame Monster. She's not singing like that anymore. Even on Born This Way, she's not singing the same way she is. And maybe it's an age thing, or maybe her voice is now starting to age. But it's like you can even hear in singers' voices that they're not pouring themselves.
Yeah, like a lack of like trying. Even I don't know.
Yeah, this is really hard to like even explain what's going on right now with art. But it feels like people are trying, but the output is just not hitting me. I would say in a lot of ways that I feel like, art that I have seen that from like, yesteryear have hit me in a lot of ways.
Can you think of anything recently, film, like music, anything that's been like...
Wow, that's kind of putting me on the spot because I really can't think of anything at the top of my head. I would say that what's inspiring is I feel like a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing people put out, just like my peers put out, like I feel like there's way too many people to name, but I feel like you kind of have to really go to the underground to find good music and go to the underground. Just the like New York underground DJ scene as a whole is what's really been inspiring me. Like if I can go to like, a set by Juliana or a set by like Archangel or DJ Miss Parker or just, go to any of these parties that happen. I would say that that's just what's been really inspiring me right now. Mm-hmm. It's just, the rave, the place, the sort of like thrill and the chase of this like amazing time that you're just like hoping and praying that you're going to have. Because, I moved to New York during the end of 2020 and they weren't really throwing raves like that. There'd be like, a one-off thing here and there. There was the era of trigger warning to the girlies at home, but the era of like Club Carry and Aunt Puke was throwing a lot of parties and stuff. And then I feel like, after she got called out for just like not paying people or whatever, and then like got canceled. I hate talking about the term canceled. Yeah. But I guess I will jump like to certain people who've been canceled. But at the end of the day, she was throwing a big series of parties, and that was a moment. I feel like things kind of fell off for a little bit. I feel like there was a moment in time where I was like, feeling very meh about the parties in New York. But I feel like in the last like really maybe this year, I feel like things have just really started to pick up. There's parties that have always been good. I've always enjoyed parties like, Gush. I've always enjoyed Body Hack, the Mutual Fund, Razor, Trans Party in New York. Like, shout out to those girls. They throw an amazing party. But, I feel like there's been few and far between consistency in New York, and it's always like just a cycle of like things are happening and they kind of die down. Things are happening and then they kind of die down. I would say that we're down an uptick of parties because, I feel like I've gone out in the last few months and I've really enjoyed the parties I've gone to. So I'm really, grateful for that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And as I asked you that question, I was sort of thinking about it myself. And the underground music scene is super inspiring for me. Like, I've been waking up at 9 a.m. on a Sunday and going to nowadays, like when we saw each other at DJ Hall, DJ sets are like, it's like an instrument.
Yeah, I feel like, we've always, just as a people, and I feel like especially like music heads, we are in for the chase of like the next best thing that we've heard. You know, after my family had moved to Albany, Georgia, I didn't really have, friends growing up. My friends were like things like music. I was just really into music, but not into the kind of music my peers were into. I mean, everybody was going through like that emo phase, but I was not really big into emo music as a teen. So I was into that more like New York and British like garage rock stuff. Like I was into the Arctic Monkeys. I was into the Strokes. I was into Libertines. I was into Franz Ferdinand.
That whole era.
Yeah, I was into Jet. Yeah, I was into like more of that garage rocky, more gritty stuff.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the My Chemical Romances and the Panic at the Discos.
And at that time, you discovered all that through MTV, or was that the internet?
Yeah, no, at this point, I was also on the internet and watching MTV at the same time.
They were still showing videos then too. I remember they had like the indie, like...
Mm-hmm. And there was like MTV2, so I was watching a lot of those through the MTV2 countdowns. Even before that, I was really into not indie music, but music that was a bit far left for people. Like when I was younger in the late 90s, some of the stuff that really stood out for me that I saw on MTV, I saw Portishead. I saw Blur. I saw Gorillaz. I've been listening to Gorillaz since their whole duration. So I've been listening to them for like 25 years at this point.
Wow.
I was really into Gorillaz. Really, I was like, this was like the new best thing. That was the first time I'd witnessed something happen in real time, like their inception. And I was like, oh, this is going to be the new best thing. And even to this day, they have a really amazing body of work. If I'm going to like talk about any bands that really like, have shaped me, like the earliest band I would say that shaped me was like Gorillaz.
Mm-hmm. What was cool about them too is that they had these avatars, right?
Exactly, that they were like a cartoon band. So it was very real, but it wasn't.
So I want to jump back into, I guess, present self, how you landed in New York and like what your time here has been so far. I think it was during the pandemic you moved here, you said?
Yeah, so I moved here at the end of 2020. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and I lived in Philadelphia since 2017. Before that, I was living in Atlanta. That's where I went to college, and I lived there for 7 years. By the time I left Atlanta, I was living at this house, and then it like flooded, and the landlord did nothing about it. And then they're like, oh, we're just like going to condemn the house. So I was like, I had to be out of Atlanta quick. I was dating somebody in Philadelphia, and I made all these friends in Philadelphia because I'd done some like performance art stuff in Philadelphia. I started doing performance art and making noise music when I lived in Atlanta under the name Sob.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that project completely done, or will that ever come to light again?
I was thinking about that before actually I came here. I was thinking that I may get into like production again next year. I kind of stopped around the time I started DJing. I kind of dropped all the production stuff altogether. I've been jumping more, like dipping my toes back into like performance art and production, like in the last like year and a half. But I've not fully jumped back into like producing original tracks. A lot of those tracks that I used in that performance, I'd made over like the last 6 years. I was doing more performances out of town, and I performed. Winnie Lopez booked me for a performance at UPenn, and then I performed there. And then that thing happened with my house where it flooded, so I had to leave. So I was like, I'm just gonna move to Philadelphia. And I was also moving there because in 2015 I'd come out as trans, and I wasn't exactly sure what my transition would look like if I was still living in the South. Because, even to this day, like we're now in 2024, and I still see a bunch of other trans people having to pay for their surgeries completely out of pocket. And yeah, transitioning to the South is not for the weak at all. Like, shout out to every trans person I know who still lives in the South, like the rural South, because things are rough, and especially with the current events, we don't know where things are going to land right now. I'm not panicking until something actually happens or a law gets passed. I feel like the only state who I've seen like really, really push that stuff has been like Florida and Texas, who are like, trans children cannot get access to hormones, even with parental consent. It's just very, very hard when you're in the South. So I left the South in 2017 and I moved to Philadelphia. I've been to New York a couple times, so I was acquainted with like their music scene and like their like underground scene. The first time I ever went to New York, my friend Parisa, who I love a lot. She let me stay on her couch, and then she took me to all these parties. I went to Raga for the first time. I went to Ghetto Gothic for the first time. I've been acquainted with New York. And then before I left the South, I went to New York one more time, in 2016. I went to a Carly Rae Jepsen party on the roof of that place, Trevor's house. I think Charlene Incarnate lived there. She was definitely hosting that party. So those are little bits and moments that really stuck out for me when I came to New York a couple times.
You mentioned Raga and Ghetto Gothic, and I just was not expecting you to say a Carly Rae Jepsen party after that. But
yeah. And it's so funny that those are the really stick out moments for me when I came to New York, visiting before I ever moved up north. That wasn't when I started really deep raving yet. It wasn't until 2018 that Philly really started having more of a bumping underground scene. I really kind of aligned that with when I started transitioning, because I went on Testosterone in February of 2018, and then they started throwing parties the spring of 2018. I purchased a studio space around that time. Right across from the hall, there was this space that was called Lacquer. Yeah, that's so in 2017, that is actually when I met DJ Delish, and she was hosting this party that was called Seltzer by Bearcat in Pre-Columbia.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still throw Seltzer anymore, but the first Seltzer was actually thrown in 2017 at this punk bar called Cousin Danny's in West Philadelphia.
Did Bearcat ever live in Philly?
Yeah, she was living in Philly at the time.
I didn't realize that.
And that's where they threw the first few times. And then when that Lacquer space opened in that warehouse, that's where it got moved. So they were throwing Seltzer there at that warehouse space, but they would have parties and shows every weekend at that warehouse space, and it was amazing. There were so many different kinds of parties happening. They had Dominican night, they had some really intense noise and electronic stuff. They were throwing great stuff there. I played a couple shows there as well. When I was doing my noise
Sob, you said?
Yeah, when I was doing my Sob project at the time. This is way before I ever started DJing. Yeah, that space was really sacred. And then it got under new management, and then it was called Rite Aid, and then it ended up closing altogether. The parties that they throw on the pier, the Walmart pier, shout out to the Walmart pier, shout out to Yosuke. Shout out to all the people who throw really good parties there. But Yosuke through this party called Concrete that was on the slab of the place called the Walmart Pier. So there's this I don't know if I should be talking about this, but if you go behind Walmart, there's this pier that's just a long slab of concrete. I think it's popular enough now where I can talk about it.
So then that was right before you moved to New York in 2020.
Yes.
You left Saab behind sort of in Philly, and now do you want to talk about your new project?
Yes, so here's how I got to the narrative being Naija Couture. So after Lacquer and the warehouse closed, there was this other DIY space called Dust Bunny that happened. And they were throwing raves and parties, different stuff every week. There's this one guy named Jim, and he used to throw this party called Pleasure Dome, which, became kind of the faggot party. So, and some people were it got a little circuit, but, it happens, as that inevitably happens with a lot of parties.
Yeah.
And when it's thrown by a white gay dude, that's when I jumped into my first, iteration of my DJ career. I guess that first version of myself, which was Rashad. I suddenly had this moment where I was I want to throw a party. I want to be a DJ. I want to do these things because I've been going to this stuff for so long. And, I'm such an eclectic and wide, diverse music taste that I was I can throw parties. I can make music. I can DJ. So at the end of 2019, it was December 2019, I threw this party called Blood Plus, which was just an variation of the blood rave. I was coming your Blade-esque, Matrix-esque, sleek looks and look cute. I had my friends DJ, so it was Dre, who's a DJ in Philadelphia, and then it was Yosuke, and then it was this collective of New Mafia. It was Otto, who is he's a DJ producer, and then it was 111, who's this girl named Mars, and it was Yaki, and I feel people in the New York scene know Yaki, that white trans girl DJ, And then I DJ'd for the first time.
You DJ'd your first party?
Yeah. And it was kind of because so here's what had happened. I had a computer at the time that was pretty crappy and it ran very slow. You know, I made it through the end of the party though, and I got a lot of compliments on the party. So I felt really thankful around that.
Regardless, your music selection, I'm sure, was on point.
yeah. It was like all like hard techno, and it was good though. And then the pandemic happened.
Were you doing like at home on Zoom DJ sets?
Yeah, so I still had that like shitty computer, so I wasn't able to like really download music or practice DJing at all. Here is where my online identity really starts to pick up and tick up.
And now, a few messages from our friends.
Revival would like to welcome you to celebrate the new year with us. January 1st, 2025 at Public Records. Starting at 2:00 p.m., Justin Cudmore will be opening up the day. Following his set, we have a very special guest, Ultra Nate. Ultra will be doing a live DJ set with live vocals, followed by Kim Ann Foxman, singer, songwriter, producer, will be closing the day out in the atrium. We're opening the upstairs. Mike Swells will be DJing. Tell your friends, bring your friends, or meet new friends because house is a vibe.
I don't know. I can't remember what I used to say, but just, you know, like even before the pandemic happened, I was making all these like little slides where it would be like some picture of me at some point, and then I would, you know, say just something, an affirmation or some sort of like, you know, just like saying or something, or, you know, one of my little like takes that I have, you know, I have so many, but just telling people, you know, let's talk about like things in life. Like, you know, you need not to be so hard on yourself, especially like if you're already in a world that's hard. Things are hard enough. Those are the kinds of things that I would say on my little bloops and blops. I don't know what to call them at this point, but, you know, that's actually, a format of like online content that I feel like later became really big. And then me and my friend, shout out to my friend DB in San Francisco. He's amazing. We made this little post and it was a picture of Justin Bieber, and remember telling you that he's a trans guy. His name is Socket. I feel like that was the first iteration of Sock, which I feel like.
So that's where Sock came from.
Yes, it's short for Socket. Sock is just what his mother calls him when he goes home for Thanksgiving. And it's this picture of Justin Bieber, and it's like so Sock needs a 5 a.m. ride to the airport, and he's willing to exchange a home-cooked vegan meal for it. And Sock is also looking to give away his cat hair colored couch. Please DM if you want this couch. And then it was like update. Sock is still looking for a ride to the airport and to give away this couch. Please DM. Mm-hmm. That was the first like couple memes and things I ever did. And then the pandemic happened. And then
was that mostly on like Twitter or what?
No, this was all on my Instagram. And I've gone through like so many different names on Instagram. You know, I'm now currently Biblically Accurate Butch Queen, but before I was Blameless Queer Icon.
Oh, that's good.
Then my name before that was What's a Nubian. That's a reference from the movie Chasing Amy. Yeah, then I became Blameless Queer Icon. I think I got into it with like some bitch on Facebook, and he was like, it was like some nonsense Butch Queen, and he was like, you just think you're some blameless queer icon, huh? And then I had that for years, and then I started getting big online, and then I really wanted to change my name. And then, I changed my handle around the same time I moved to New York, which was at the end of 2020. So the pandemic, I keep being like the pandemic happens. Let me actually tell the story of how I got to New York. So the pandemic happened in March. I was living in Philadelphia for all that duration of the year. I got a residency in upstate New York, and I was also shooting porn at the time. So I was in and out of New York for a little bit. And then when I was at that residency, everybody was like, you should move to New York. You should move to New York. It seems like you really want to move to New York.
Where upstate was it? I grew up upstate, so I
always
like to check.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
So they were saying, you want to move to New York, you should move to New York.
So all the people who were also at that artist residency were like, you should move to New York, you should move to New York. And I was like, I would, But, you know, I have a little savings, but I feel like it's not enough money to move to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I was teaching preschool prior to the pandemic. I taught preschool from like when I first moved to Philly. So from 2017 up until the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was doing virtual online teaching for, you know, the preschool and the after school program I was working with. I was connected to the preschool. I did that up until that July. They said either you could quit and just get unemployment, or you could come back. And I was like, I don't think I want to come back in a teaching environment during a pandemic.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll claim unemployment. And then I kept, you know, trying to file. And I go to that artist residency in like late August. And, you know, I'm still applying. I'm still just hoping. I'm still just trying to figure out maybe if I had a little bit more money, I could move to New York. And then it was the week before Thanksgiving. So we're like now in like late November. The week before Thanksgiving, I finally get all that money. So I was like, I can just leave and go to New York now. So I tell my roommates I'm trying to go to New York. I was in a situation where I was like sleeping with this guy in New York when I would go to New York. And I told him that I wanted to move to New York. I was looking for a place to live and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, you can just live with me. And, you know, don't do things like that. For the people at home, do not move in with a guy you barely know, especially if you haven't really talked about like your interests and how you live. Don't do that. But
Great,
it was
great advice.
No, but it was just a good way how to get out of the city. I mean, how to get out of Philly.
Yeah.
And then finally go to New York. You know, the first couple weeks were actually pretty fun. I lived in Borough Park, which is like a few stops from Coney Island. So I was definitely far from all the people who would be like in Bedside and Bushwick. I didn't really live near anybody I knew. But I was still managing to like just get out of the house, and I would jump on the train and I would go on adventures and stuff like that. One of the first things I did when I first moved to New York, Jasmine Infinity had invited me to DJ on some streaming thing, and they like filmed all of us. It was like me, her, Cotton, Princess Peggy, a bunch of other people. That was really nice of her. I've always really appreciated Jasmine Infinity. She's somebody who I definitely call my DJ mom, who was like, you know, you should keep going, you should keep pushing, you should keep doing all that. But I was primarily like a bedroom DJ. I would DJ on, you know, those live streams and, you know, virtual parties and stuff like that. I would just DJ off my little controller in my bedroom. It was really fun.
Doesn't that seem like so far, like so long ago?
I know, that's such a different era. We live in such a different world than when we did like during like deep lockdown. It's always just so, I'm always just like, that happened.
It kind of like almost reminds me of like being a teen and like being online on the forums and like, you know, connecting to people digitally online.
I wasn't much of a digital forum, like, you know, chat room kid. I just spent a lot of time in my room listening to music because... So
it was like a solo experience for you.
Yeah, because I was somebody who always had a hard time making friends. So, you know, this is just like autism tease in hindsight. This is the autistic experience. So I was really connected to music. I really was into, like I said, I was really into Gorillaz. I was really into the grunge band Alice in Chains. I was really into the garage rock that I talked about, you know, the Strokes, Arctic Monkeys, Franz Ferdinand, Libertines. I was really into that. But then I was also really into house. I loved Crystal Waters so much. Yeah. And I loved Delight so much. I was really into like all this like rock and stuff, but then I was also really into like house music as well.
That's one band I would love to see get back together, Delight.
I know. Oh my God.
Just for one night and like in New York, let us all experience it once.
Ooh, yes. Oh my God. That would be the most crazy experience ever, to like see Delight live.
I'm curious about like your introduction to the rave scene and like how that's changed over the past few years. Like, I'd love to hear your take on where we are as a rave culture, as a nightlife culture.
Yeah. So the first time I ever like really went raving was during the whole like big like EDM and dubstep movement of the early 2010s when Skrillex was really big. Mm-hmm. So there was this one EDM club that I would go to a lot. I went to like a few raves and stuff, but I realized a lot of those white raver kids were really racist. Mm-hmm. So I really was actually put off by raving for many, many, many years until I moved to Philly and I got into their underground rave scene that, you know, had a lot of black and brown people, had really good music, had actually that camaraderie that I really appreciated in the rave scene where it's like, you know, people actually care about each other. So that really instilled my faith in the raving. After I came out as trans in 2015, 2016 was when I really started like presenting like a guy or like presenting masculine, quote unquote. And the first time I ever did that was a night where this one like little fashion boy, he booked Juliana Huxtable to play at this space called Mammal Gallery. So she DJ'd there and it was really, really good. And I had a really, really great time. And I still have this picture to this day of me and my friend Ify. And we're like hugging, and I'm there with my little drawn-on mustache, and I look so happy. Because at that point in my life, you know, I wasn't really that happy. I was going through a lot of stuff. You know, just like trying to like figure out myself around like, you know, my, at the time, non-binary hood. But I feel like I always knew that I was like trans-masculine. Like I wanted to be a masculine person. You know, eventually I wanted to be a man. Just us hugging, and there's like Juliana in the background DJing.
Amazing.
It was like really great. Shout out to Juliana Huxtable. Like, you know, she's an icon in and of herself. You know, she's somebody who I saw on like Tumblr back in the day. Her and like Khalifa, FKA Leaf, like the video for Soda will always be like a cornerstone of iconery in like the black Tumblr like era of the early 2010s. When I started raving in New York, I would go to like some parties here or there. They threw those parties on the train tracks, and also Club Carrie, you know, like I said, you know, people hate Ampuke, but she was throwing like a consistent party series that was happening in New York for like post like and during the like pandemic era. And now we're in this current era where there are parties that are now starting to, I really just say like in this like really more current moment, these parties are now like the current duration of parties is people throwing these parties with door policies around whether men, like specifically cis men, should be there. They don't call it this in a lot of spaces, but you know, there's this term now starting to come into the American rave scene that was taken from Berlin called Flinta, and Flinta stands for female, lesbian, intersex, non-binary, trans, and I guess...
I'm not sure what the A is.
Yeah, what's the A? Like, it's not asexual, obviously. Agender? I think it's agender.
Okay.
Oof.
Okay. Thank God you said
yeah, I caught myself. Yeah, I was like, ooh, girl. I don't know what I'm saying at this point. That's what the acronyms for me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, we already got LGBT. There's so many acronyms.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Flinta party is now starting to become a thing. Like, there's this party called Flinta that I'm going to tonight. And, you know, I'll see how it gives. I just, you know, I'm in a place in my transition where I can pass for cis. And very more recently, in like the last year and a half, I've been in weird situations where, you know, people don't know my tea. And I was at some lesbian club. I'm not going to name which one it was, but I like was walking through the club and this girl like saw me and jumped back. Like, that's not the club's fault, but there is still just this, like, very, like, demographic of people that aren't used to seeing, you know, cis-passing men in clubs, like cis-passing trans men. And I feel like these are, like, non-problem problems because, you know, the fact that I pass is how I'm able to, like, secure a job.
Yeah.
The fact that I pass is how, you know, I'm able to, like, navigate walking down the street. Because, you know, I get nearly no threats to my safety. The fact that, you know, I walk down the street and nobody knows my tea. But when I was like, you know, a woman, you know, men would get in my face, men would threaten me, men would do all this stuff. Or when I was earlier in my transition, you know, men would treat me terrible and all this other stuff, you know. But I'm in a place where luckily I am able to, you know, walk, you know, through the streets of like, you know, a back street or something. I'm able to walk out and like go clubbing alone without having to worry about my safety. That does correlate with my current experiences with clubbing, is that I'm able to navigate just, you know, New York City as a whole a lot safer than I did when, you know, I was still identifying as a woman. So when I go to these parties, I do get a bit in my head around like, is somebody going to feel weird that I'm in these spaces? But I have to remember, you know, I come from like these lived experiences. You know, I was a Black woman prior to my transition, and I was femme identifying prior to my transition. I was not masculine. So every little bit of masculinity that I have is something that has had to be learned and perfected. We talk about the performance of gender. I'm performing gender. When I was in Philadelphia in these rave scenes, I was the only black trans man in these rave scenes. Like the only one at the time. So my performance of gender has made me stick out for a long time. And it's also made me, really have to think and check myself around a lot of things. But also it's helped me in a way where, I go to these clubs, I go to these parties. A lot of people know who I am. They see my page. They laugh at the meme. But a big thing that I also like to talk about on my page is real life serious shit. And something that I really talk about is just this lack of care that I've seen, spark up, especially during the pandemic, after the pandemic. People are like, we're going to need each other, but people have become so selfish, that I come to these clubs and parties to see familiar faces and see people that actually care about each other. But there's a lot of people I don't know in these parties and stuff, and I've just seen, the way people treat each other, and it's a lot of stuff that I don't like.
Yeah.
Let's get into the serious stuff. We talk about the drugs. We talk about the drugs that people are doing in these clubs. We talk about drugs that may make people get a little carried away. Like if somebody does a little bit too much K, they can end up getting in the K hole. Somebody does, GHB, they could fall out. Yeah. Somebody does the wrong cocktail of drugs, something not great could happen. But, nobody really talks about how are we showing up for people when that happens. And that's like a big thing that I talk about and I actually do in my practice. I'm not just going to talk about this kind of stuff and then not do anything. If I see somebody fucked up at the club, I'm going to check on them.
Yeah.
Like, if I see somebody too fucked up, I'm going to ask them if they need a car home. People really don't think about what people are going through. Sometimes I don't even care if they're going through. I'm still going to help them. Yeah. I'd help people who I had like bad friend falling outs with. They were falling out in the club. It's like, bitch, I'm still going to get you a car home. I don't give a fuck. Because I'm willing to put that petty shit aside because, what if somebody that we all knew at the club, at the rave, what if they died? Nobody really wants to think about those things because then they're like, oh, you're thinking negative. Bitch, I'm thinking real. We've been through a lot in these past, 5 years, in the pandemic. And a lot of people just want to act like that stuff didn't happen. Like, that stuff isn't still, mentally affecting people. Like, that stuff isn't stuff that we all have to think about. And now, after this election, we are now in another wave again, where people are taking this really, really hard. You don't know what people are thinking. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know how hard they're taking it. I saw a lot of people say that, they're going to get bombed. They're going to need some drugs after, finding out that Trump is elected. And, girlies, do your drugs. Nobody really cares about that at this point. But I asked online, I'm like, are you thinking about where you're going to land after your bender? Are you thinking about where you're going to land after your spiral? Do you have a safe community to land with?
Yeah.
It
can't be the exit. You have to stay grounded. You can't look at these drugs and these spirals as an exit from a situation because you have to land somewhere.
Exactly. Trump is still going to be elected even after you finish that bag early. Mm-hmm. And, what are you going to do for yourself? You don't have to do anything for anybody else, but what are you going to do for yourself in these times? Yeah. I feel like I've often been very selfless, but I'm ready to get selfish. You know what I mean? I'm having to really think about how am I taking care of myself? I can't really take care of anybody else right now.
Yeah.
I really, need to focus on my job. I want top surgery next year. I need to focus on how I'm going to save money for that. I probably will have to lean into my community for that. I feel like I'm always showing up for my community in ways, but that's from the trauma of not being connected to my family post-transition. Yeah. Even though we always had hard times connecting with each other anyway, because I just feel in my immediate family, there's a lot of mental illness, and mental illness does run in my family. But, nobody's getting help for that stuff. So it's we really had no connection even before I ever came out as trans. I didn't really connect with my family. Mm-hmm. So, just coming out kind of put the nail in the coffin around that, where it's I haven't seen them in 7 years now. Yeah, even before I got on hormones, I haven't seen them since. I've, medically transitioned, and I haven't been back to my hometown almost 10 years. Wow. So I gave up a lot in order to like transition. So I take all of these and I haven't felt really safe except for in these party and rave spaces. So I take all of this very seriously.
Yeah.
Like I care about everybody who I meet and see. So that's why I pour so much of myself into like the words I say online, into how I show up for other people. Mm-hmm. But, I'm in a place where I'm definitely trying to step back and show up for myself.
Yeah, I mean, you've done so much for the community. Pour into yourself and lean on your community. It's, I always appreciate your takes on things. Even if it's a party, like you're always reflecting. And I think that talking about stuff that sometimes people are uncomfortable to talk about, but it needs to be talked about.
Exactly. Because I'm like, if I see this, I know other people are seeing all of this, but somebody needs to say something so we can actually have an outer conversation. I would like us to like have more panels where we talk about drug use in the community, where we talk about certain groups of people not feeling seen in the community. And there are certain things that I'm not even going through that, I can't talk about. Like, I'm not a fat person in New York. I don't have a physical disability. And there, are people who are going through those kinds of things and they feel like they have to keep pushing or hide themselves or be on the constant defense because people aren't checking for them or checking up on them. Because, it takes like free 99. It takes like no money to just call up somebody or send them a text and be like, hey, are you okay? I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? And that's what I really just like to let people know is like, how are we showing up for each other?
Yeah.
When a lot of people have not shown up for us.
Totally. No, I agree with you 100%. But you've said so much that's so important. Like, thank you so much for saying everything you just said.
Yeah.
Like, is there anything else you want to maybe...
I guess in the past couple of years, I've gotten a lot of opportunity. I did that Pride gig with D-Diggs, which was really great. So I DJ'd 5 hours of trip hop there.
Wow.
I've done a lot of radio. That's all trip hop. I've just been really just diving into DJing trip hop. I have, in the past couple of years, been diving into DJing in Toronto with my friend Leo, who's also really amazing, another trans masculine person. He's another trans guy. And he's also somebody who reached out to me and was like, I love everything that you do. You're such an inspiration. I didn't really realize how many other trans masculine DJs and trans masculine people I've inspired through DJing. I was a trans masculine person DJing when there weren't really any others doing it. And I didn't know until rather recently that meant so much to other people.
Love to see it.
Yeah, me too. It's one of these things where no matter what I'm going through, I'm still going to just keep pushing. I'm still just going to keep being here. This like current version of myself, because we were talking about, where you've been, where you were, and where you are now. It's like this current version of myself, like my DJ name is Naija Couture. That's an homage to just the amazing culture that I have as a Nigerian person. I'm Nigerian American. I've been to Nigeria a few times. We're in this current state of the world where a lot of people are finally giving Nigerian people their props. Like so many of us are in the mainstream. Like there's Ayo, there's Tyler the Creator. We all love Sade. Fela Kuti was often a big figurehead of Nigerian music and Afrobeat as a whole as a genre. There's this big resurgence in the Nollywood film genre.
Oh yeah.
People love Nollywood. The Nollywood aesthetics now has also been a big backdrop in fashion. So I'm in a place where I feel really good about where I am. I'm very lucky that I have a stable job. I'm lucky that people still book me. I'm lucky that, I'm still thought of as a person in a world where so many of us have been forgotten. I guess my next DJ gig, I can plug that. Even though this will probably come out after that DJ gig. So on the 23rd, I'm DJing this all trans mask strip club, and I'm really excited to be doing that. I'm excited that somebody reached out. This person named Ro. I'm excited that he reached out to me to have me do that. So that's what I have looking forward to in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, this will come out after, unfortunately, but this is a time capsule as well. So if you weren't there, scroll back to the archives for that.
Exactly,
I made a joke nowadays about you should be a professor, and I was like, Professor Xavier, like maybe you have so much knowledge. Like it's been a pleasure just hearing you talk about all of this,
thank you.
Your history and stuff like that, but keep doing what you're doing. I love all the takes, all the reflection. It's important. And as you see, it touches so many people and inspires so many.
We talked about that. I use my social media as a place of outward reflection. Mm-hmm. My social media, like I said, it's evolved into so many places. I am now known for mainly my mood boards and takes. There was a point where I would post about artists that I feel like don't get as much props as they should. And here are two ones that stood out. Mm-hmm. So I was mentioning, off of the recording, I told you about how I did one about Jodie Watley, mm-hmm. who was this amazing 80s R&B singer. She was big around the late 80s. I feel like she doesn't get as much props as our Whitneys or our Sade. She's an amazing singer, and she actually liked the post that I made about her. She messaged me. And another big artist is actually the rap group. I don't know what you call that genre, jazz rap or whatever. I would feel like, they really set the bar for Kendrick Lamar and other artists who sample a lot of jazz primarily. And, it's the group Diggable Planets.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I posted about Diggable Planets and how amazing they were, and each of them
trio.
Each of them liked my posts.
That's cool.
I forget which one. I think his name's Butterfly. I think he's now Shabazz Palaces.
Oh,
yeah, that's who Shabazz Palaces is.
That's really cool.
He liked the post. Actually, all three of them liked the post. I used to do a lot of that on my Instagram. I feel like the most recent dedication I've given was the Fuck the Pain Away Fall.
That's so good.
Yeah, and apparently I know this one guy, and he told me, he was like, oh yeah, I'm hanging out with Peaches and she really wants to see the post. And I was like, unfortunately my Instagram is currently private because of what I do for work. I'm a school teacher, so I have to keep it private because, those kids don't need to be all in my tea.
Wasn't Peaches also a preschool teacher?
Oh, was she? I didn't know
I think that's where Teachers of Peaches, sort of the name came from.
Oh, wow, that's so funny. I didn't know that. But, yeah, this guy messaged me. He was like, I'm hanging with Peaches and she really wants to see this post. And I was like, she needs to follow me like everyone else does in order to get into my page. But I also sent him the screenshots. I was like, you can just send Peaches this. So I think maybe Peaches has seen my post. I don't know.
I know you hit some afters here and there. What's a good afters for you?
Ooh, after parties?
Yeah.
Wow. So the best afters that I've probably ever been to was New Year's 2020. And I spent the last couple weeks of 2019 just partying in New York at different parties. And this afters was Disc Cakes had thrown, or which later became X Cakes, Polly Cakes' party had thrown this rave in a mall in Chinatown.
Oh, wow.
That was really good. So I went to both of those. I went to the mall in Chinatown first because I wanted to see DJ Delish play. And then I went to Melting Point after. And then after that, there was at that place, Trevor's House that I mentioned, the New Year's 2020 afters was there. Mm-hmm. So it was just a lot of the fashion girls Sosha and Fashion and Memphi and Princess Peggy and Polly Cakes. All DJ that afters, and it was just in that small apartment. So it was just a lot of shirtless gays and all the girls, and everybody was just dancing on tables and stuff like that. It was really, really good. That's probably still one of the best afters that I've been to. Yeah. I feel now there's so many parties that happen so long, mm-hmm. Merge and
Nonstop.
There's Nonstop and Zero Chill. Those parties that go up until late afternoon.
It kind of becomes the after.
Exactly. Yeah. There's I go to a lot of those where I could leave, get a bunch of sleep, and then still come back.
It's the best. I mean, running into it nowadays.
Exactly.
It's just,
I love the Nonstop. I am going to that Flinta party tonight, but then I'm probably going to get a few hours of sleep because Kevin Ambiance is DJing at noon at Nowadays, and I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Me and Kevin DJ'd a Poppy Juice last year. We were on the same Poppy Juice bill, so I got to go to the back room and hug Kevin and give her all her flowers that she deserves so much. That was really fun.
All right. Well, that's all that I've got for you. Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure just speaking with you and getting some of your wisdom. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Like I said, let's all just show each other a little bit of care because we all deserve it. Mm-hmm. We all need it.
Absolutely. This episode of Afters was directed, recorded, and produced by Anthony Cuellar. Art by Waldo Baez. Original music by Niccolo Bernardi. With a special message from Hugh and the Monthly Dance Party Revival.